Welcome to part 47 of our series, Secrets of Glessner House. In this installment, we will explore the complicated history behind our Stamnos, purchased by the Glessners during their one and only trip to Europe. This large Greek-style vase is known as a Stamnos. The term refers to a wide-mouthed jar with two handles, used for mixing wine and water, the way in which ancient Greeks consumed their wine. The Glessners believed it was an authentic piece from antiquity. Restoration work done in 1990 confirmed that the entire painted surface, applied over ancient fragments, dated to the late 19th century. This was a common practice amongst dealers trading with wealthy Americans who were anxious to bring antiquities and artworks back home from their European grand tour. We start our story with how the Glessners came to purchase the piece. On February 15, 1890, they sailed from New York aboard the steamship La Bretagne. Over the next 2 months, they visited numerous cities in France and Italy. On March 13th, they arrived in Rome, where they stayed for nearly 2 weeks. This image, taken from an album of purchased photographs they assembled after their trip, shows the Quirinal Palace, named after its location on the Quirinal Hill, the highest of the 7 hills of Rome. At the time of the Glessners' visit, it was the residence of the royal family. Today it functions as the residence of the President of the Italian Republic. The Glessners stayed at the Hotel Quirinale, located within walking distance of the palace. Opened in 1865 and still operating today, it has always ranked among the finest hotels in Rome. One of its amenities that would no doubt have appealed to the Glessners is its private passageway to Rome's Opera House. Francis Glessner arrived in Rome with a letter of introduction from a friend in Chicago to Elena Lanciani, the American-born wife of Professor Rodolfo Lanciani. He was a leading Italian archaeologist of the period, known for his series of detailed maps of the ancient city of Rome, which are still widely consulted. Just days before sailing for Europe, Frances Glessner noted in her journal that she had finished reading Lanciani's newest book, Ancient Rome in the Light of Recent Excavations. The Glessners both had a deep interest in European history and were well-informed travelers. The opportunity to connect with a leading scholar in Rome would have been most appealing. As an interesting aside, glued inside the book is an envelope addressed to John Glessner containing a note from Professor Lanciani, dated June 4, 1890. The note thanks him for sending photos of his Chicago and New Hampshire residences after he had returned home. Lanciani noted in part, quote, "Your city residence seems to me to have been designed by Richardson, or by one of his pupils or imitators. I like the style so much," unquote. After receiving the letter of introduction, Elena Lanciani wrote to the Glessners the morning of March 17th, inviting them to visit that afternoon, when both she and her husband would be at home. The Lancianis resided in this building at 107 Babuino. During her time in Europe, Frances Glessner always carried this small leather-bound book, filled with the addresses of shops, galleries, artists, and others, gathered from her friends in Chicago, who had previously been in Europe. During their visit with the Lancianis on the 17th, the professor recommended 3 shops that had a variety of goods he thought would be of interest. Frances Glessner wrote the names and addresses in her book, in the section outlined here in red. The next morning, despite heavy rain, Frances Glessner set out to visit all 3 shops, making a number of purchases. Her first stop was the shop of Massimiliano Pirani at 11 Via della Mercede. That building still stands. and the Pirani shop is now occupied by a perfumery. Pirani had an established reputation in Rome. Here we see the cover of one of his auction catalogs, featuring very interesting collections, including bronzes, ivories, porcelains, and much more. American museums, including the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston, acquired pieces through Pisani. It was in Pirani's shop that Francis Glessner purchased the Stamnos, along with additional items including a bronze copy of a statuette by Leonardo da Vinci, an antique marble bust, and a gilded copper chatelaine. One of the other items purchased in Pirani's was this silver oil lamp known as a lanterna, which is still displayed on the piano in the parlor. Francis Glessner was also excited to find and purchase exquisite old Venetian point lace, which she later used for her daughter's wedding gown. It can be seen over the shoulders in this 1898 photograph. The Stamnos was packed along with the Glessners' other treasures and shipped to Chicago. They placed it in the library, immediately next to the doorway to the main hall, where it would have been easily visible to visitors. John Glessner mentions it in his later writings, including The Story of a House, where he refers to it as a fine specimen. Although the Glessners referred to their piece variously as Greek or Etruscan, it was neither, although it was descended from both. The earliest pottery of this type, made in Greece between the 7th and 4th centuries BCE, was known as Attic pottery, named after the Attica region around Athens. An example is seen here at left. Many of the Greek pieces were exported to the Etruscan market, and they then started producing their own pieces, as seen on the right. Both show what is known as red figure pottery, where the background is painted black, and the figures are left in their natural, unpainted terracotta color. The design of our Stamnos most closely resembles those made by the Falisci, a culture that existed northwest of the Tiber River, adjacent to the Etruscans, as seen to the right of center on this map. Here are two Faliscan examples of a Stamnos. One of the main differences is the elaborate handles, which will be discussed shortly. Additionally, both are examples of pseudo-red figure vase painting, meant to look like the earlier Greek and Etruscan examples, but here the entire surface is painted, the figures being done in a terracotta-colored paint. Comparing the Faliscan originals on the right to our Stamnos on the left, we can see several similarities. The bands of decoration at the top lip and above and below the main panels are nearly identical. Also, the sides beneath the handles are filled with volutes and stylized palmettes, typical of Faliscan pieces. The most striking similarity is the elaborate handle comprising a pair of sea monsters. Specifically, the sea monster is known as a Ketos. Here we see a mosaic showing a Ketos unearthed at the House of the Dragon in the ancient city of Colonia, near the southern tip of Italy. The Ketos features the body of a dragon and the tail of a fish. Returning to our piece, we can clearly see the crested head of a Ketos to either side, and the small fish tails hanging down from where the handle attaches to the body. One side of the Stamnos shows a seated male figure at left, presenting a swan to a standing female figure at right. Swans represented romantic love. Female figures and features like swans were typically painted white. The reason these features on our piece are gray is unknown. Either the paint used changed color over time, or the 19th century painter deliberately used a grayish-white color to give the appearance of age. The male figure is holding a staff in his right hand known as a thyrsus, consisting of a giant stem of fennel surmounted by a pine cone. It traditionally was used as a symbol of Dionysus, the god of wine, so very appropriate for a vessel that held wine. The other side of the Stamnos features a standing woman at either side, with a seated male figure in the center. Again, the female figures appear much darker than they would have originally. The male figure is holding a large, shallow cup known as a kylix, used for drinking wine. The female figure at right is pouring wine into his cup. This image shows the condition of the Stamnos when it was received from the Glessner grandchildren in 1975. There was considerable damage to the upper lip and the base, and several breaks in the handles. In 1989, it was sent to conservator Anthony Siegel at the Art Institute for examination, both to determine its authenticity and to recommend the conservation treatment. The examination confirmed that the Stamnos was actually a network of reassembled fragments held together with shellac, with losses filled in with plaster. The entire surface under the decoration was covered in at least 2 thin layers of black paint to make it appear smooth. Conservation work included reattaching the fragments, filling the losses, and then in-painting as needed. All materials used were reversible, and the in-painting was done in such a way that it is slightly visible, making the repair work easy to distinguish from the late 19th century finish. The conserved Stamnos was returned to Glessner House in November 1990 and has been displayed continuously in the library since that time. Although it is not the antiquity the Glessners thought it was, the discoveries made during the conservation tell a fascinating story of how pieces like this were cleverly fabricated in the late 19th century to fool even expert collectors. We hope you have enjoyed learning more about our Stamnos, one of numerous items acquired by the Glessners during their 1890 European adventure. Tune in next time when another secret will be revealed.